The guards dragged Sam Carter through the cold metal hallways without a single word. His boots scraped against the floor as he tried to find his footing, but they moved too fast. The lights above were bright and white, hurting his eyes after hours in the dark holding cell where they had kept him since capturing his cargo ship. Sam was 34 years old, a pilot who had spent the last 6 years moving supplies between human colonies. He was not a soldier, not anymore. He had left that life behind after serving as a medic in the Earth Fleet, but none of that mattered to the Valkyrie. To them, he was just another specimen. The Valkyrie were tall and thin, with gray skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their eyes were large and black, showing no emotion. They spoke to each other in quick, clicking sounds that Sam could not understand. Everything about them felt cold and calculated. They stopped in front of a large door. One of the guards pressed a panel on the wall, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Before Sam could see what was inside, they shoved him forward. He stumbled and fell to his knees on the hard floor. The door closed behind him with a final sound. Sam pushed himself up slowly, his muscles aching from the rough treatment. The room was large, maybe 20 feet wide and 30 feet long. The walls were smooth and gray, with no windows. One wall was made of thick glass, and behind it, Sam could see Valkyrie scientists watching him. They held small devices and made notes, studying him like an animal in a cage, because that was exactly what he was now. A low growl made Sam freeze. He turned his head slowly, searching the dim corners of the cell. The main lights were bright in the center, but the edges of the room fell into shadow. Something moved in the far corner, and 2 points of light reflected back at him. Eyes. Sam stayed very still. The growl came again, deeper this time, filled with warning. He could make out a shape now, small and crouched low to the ground. Whatever it was scared and ready to attack. He took a slow step backward, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. The creature did not care. It lunged at him with shocking speed, and Sam barely twisted away in time. He felt a sharp pain across his left arm and looked down to see 3 shallow cuts bleeding through his torn sleeve. Claws. The creature landed a few feet away and spun to face him. Now Sam could see it clearly in the light. His breath caught in his throat. It was a child. She was small, maybe the size of an 8-year-old human girl, but she was clearly not human. Silver fur covered her body, matted and dirty from what looked like years of neglect. Her ears were pointed and pressed flat against her head in fear. Her hands ended in curved claws, still wet with his blood. A thin tail hung behind her, tucked low between her legs, but her eyes were what struck Sam the most. They were golden, bright, and intelligent, and filled with so much fear and pain that it made his chest hurt. She growled again, showing sharp teeth, warning him to stay back. Her whole body trembled, caught between the need to fight and the need to run. Sam understood. He had seen that look before in wounded soldiers and frightened refugees. This was not a monster. This was a traumatized child who had learned that every other creature meant her harm. Slowly, carefully, Sam lowered himself to the ground. He sat down against the wall opposite her, as far away as he could get in the confined space. He kept his hands visible, resting on his knees, making himself as small and non-threatening as possible. The girl watched him with wide eyes, confused. Her growl faded into an uncertain whine. She had expected him to attack. She had prepared for violence. But he just sat there, bleeding quietly, looking at the floor instead of at her. Behind the glass, Sam could hear the faint sounds of the Valkyrie talking to each other. He did not need to understand their language to know what they were doing. This was an experiment. They wanted to see what would happen when 2 primitive species were locked together. They were waiting for blood. They would be disappointed. Sam took a slow breath and let it out. He did not look at the girl. He did not move toward her. He just sat there, existing peacefully in the same space as her. The minutes passed. The girl stayed in her corner, watching him without blinking. Her body remained tense, ready to spring at any moment, but she did not attack again. Eventually, the bright lights above began to dim. The Velthury scientists behind the glass grew bored with the lack of action. They spoke to each other, made final notes, and left the observation area. The room fell into a gray twilight, just bright enough to see shapes but not details. Sam stayed where he was. His arm hurt, but the cuts were not deep. He had survived worse. In the silence, he began to speak. Not to the girl exactly, but to the empty air. He kept his voice low and soft, like he was talking to himself. "My name is Sam," he said. "I used to be a medic. That means I helped people who were hurt. I flew a cargo ship before they caught me. Nothing special, just moving supplies from one place to another. I had a little plan in the cockpit. A small green thing. I wonder if it is still alive." The words did not matter. He knew she probably could not understand them. But the tone mattered. The softness mattered. He was filling the darkness with something other than fear. In her corner, the girl tilted her head slightly. The growling had stopped completely now. She did not understand this creature. He did not act like the others. He did not try to grab her or hurt her or stick needles in her skin. He just sat there, making gentle sounds. She watched him until her eyes grew heavy. She did not sleep, not truly, but some of the tension left her body. For the first time in a very long time, she shared a space with another living being and was not in pain. Sam noticed the change. He allowed himself a small, sad smile, but did not let her see it. This was going to take time. But time was all they had. 3 days passed inside the gray cell. Sam learned the rhythm of their prison quickly. The lights would brighten in what he assumed was morning, dim slightly in the afternoon, and fall to near darkness at night. Food came twice a day through a small slot in the wall. 2 nutrient blocks, brown and tasteless, dropped onto the floor without ceremony. The Velthury did not speak to them. They only watched through the glass, taking notes, waiting for something interesting to happen. Sam made sure nothing interesting happened. Each time the food arrived, he took his block and broke it in half. He placed one half in the middle of the floor, as close to the girl's corner as he dared, then retreated to his own side of the cell. He ate his portion slowly, never looking directly at her, never making sudden movements. The first day, she waited until she thought he was asleep before creeping forward to snatch the offering. Sam watched through barely open eyes, keeping his breathing slow and steady. She ate quickly, desperately, like she expected someone to take it away at any moment. Then she retreated to her corner and watched him until morning. The second day, she came for the food a little earlier. She still watched him with suspicion, but some of the fear had faded from her golden eyes. By the third day, she was waiting for him to place the food down. When he did, she approached almost immediately, though she still kept a safe distance between them. Progress. Sam filled the hours with his voice. He talked about Earth, describing things she had never seen. He told her about rain, how water fell from the sky and made everything smell fresh and clean. He told her about grass, soft and green, and how it felt to walk barefoot through a field in summer. He told her about sunshine, warm and golden, nothing like the cold artificial lights above them. "My sister loved the rain," he said one evening, sitting against his wall with his knees drawn up. Her name was Lily. She would run outside every time a storm came, just to feel it on her face. My mother would yell at her to come inside, but she never listened. She was wild like that, free. The girl tilted her head at the softness in his voice. She did not understand the words, but she understood the feeling behind them. This was how someone sounded when they talked about things they loved. On the 4th day, the Velthury decided to intervene. Without warning, the lights blazed to full brightness. A terrible sound filled the cell, high-pitched and painful, driving into Sam's skull like needles. He covered his ears and dropped to his knees, but the sound was everywhere, inescapable. The girl screamed. It was the first real sound he had heard her make besides growling. She thrashed in her corner, clawing at her own ears, overwhelmed by her heightened senses. Then the floor began to shock them. Bursts of electricity pulsed through the metal, making Sam's muscles seize and spasm. He gritted his teeth against the pain, his vision going white at the edges. Through the chaos, he saw the girl curled into a ball, shaking violently. She was smaller than him, weaker. This would hurt her more. Sam did not think. He moved on instinct, crawling across the floor despite the shocks. He reached the girl and covered her body with his own, using himself as a shield. The electricity hurt. The sound hurt. Everything hurt. But at least she was protected. It lasted for 5 minutes, though it felt like hours. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The lights dimmed back to normal. The sound cut off. The floor went still. Sam collapsed onto his side, breathing hard. His whole body ached, and he could smell something burning. He looked down and saw marks on his arms where the shocks had left their touch. The girl uncurled slowly. She stared at him with wide eyes, trembling from fear and confusion. He had put himself between her and the pain. He had taken hurt that was meant for her. Why would he do that? Sam managed a weak smile. "It is okay," he whispered. "It is over now." She did not understand the words, but she understood the smile. Something shifted in her golden eyes. The wall she had built around herself cracked, just a little. That night, Sam sat against the wall, too tired to speak. His body ached from the shocks, and the cuts on his arm from the first day had started to sting again. He closed his eyes, trying to rest. A soft sound made him open them. The girl had moved closer, only a few feet away now. She was sniffing the air, her nose twitching as she studied him. She looked at the marks on his arms, the wounds he had collected, the exhaustion on his face. Slowly, carefully, she reached out one clawed hand. Sam held his breath. She touched his arm, just barely, her fingers brushing over the burn marks. Then she pulled back quickly and retreated to her corner. But she did not go all the way back. She stopped halfway, closer to him than she had ever been before. Sam felt something warm bloom in his chest. It was hope. He did not push. He did not try to touch her in return. He just nodded once and closed his eyes again. "Thank you," he said softly. The next morning, he tore a strip of fabric from his shirt. It was not much, thin and worn, but it was something. He placed it in the middle of the floor, the same way he placed the food. "For you," he said, "to keep warm." She watched him for a long time. Then, when she thought he was not looking, she crept forward and took it. She held it to her nose, smelling his scent on the fabric. Then she carried it back to her corner and wrapped it around herself. Sam turned his head away so she would not see him smile. Behind the glass, the Valkyrie watched and made their notes. They did not understand what they were seeing. Their instruments measured heartbeats and stress hormones and brain activity, but they could not measure trust. They could not quantify kindness. They had no idea what was growing right in front of them. By the 7th day, Sam had learned to read her. When her ears pressed flat against her head, she was scared. When her tail hung low and still, she was uncertain. When she made a soft chirping sound in the back of her throat, almost like a purr, she was calm. He heard that chirping sound more often now. The Valkyrie had grown frustrated with their experiment. They wanted conflict, violence, data they could use. Instead, they got 2 quiet creatures who shared food and sat in comfortable silence. So they changed their approach. The food portions became smaller. Where once they received 2 nutrient blocks each day, now they received only 1. Sam did not hesitate. He broke his half in 2 and gave the larger piece to her. He could survive on less. She was still growing. Then they lowered the temperature. The cell became cold enough that Sam could see his breath in the air. He shivered in his thin clothes, his body struggling to maintain warmth. The girl handled the cold better than him. Her fur provided some protection. But she still trembled at night when the temperature dropped even further. On the 8th night, Sam made a decision. He had already given her strips of his shirt. Now he pulled the whole thing over his head, leaving himself bare-chested in the freezing cell. He walked to the middle of the room and placed the shirt on the floor. "Here," he said, his teeth chattering. "You need it more than me." She watched him from her corner, her golden eyes following his every move. He retreated to his wall and sat down, wrapping his arms around himself for warmth. For a long time, nothing happened. Then she moved. She crossed the floor in small, careful steps. She picked up the shirt and held it, feeling its warmth from his body. She looked at him, shivering and cold, giving away the last thing he had. Something in her broke. Not the bad kind of breaking. The kind where walls fall down and light comes in. She walked toward him. Sam held his breath, not daring to move. She stopped in front of him, close enough to touch. Her ears were up, her tail swaying gently behind her. The chirping sound was back, soft and steady. Then she sat down beside him and draped the shirt over both of them. Sam felt tears sting his eyes. He blinked them back, keeping his breathing steady. She had chosen to share. She had chosen to be close. After everything she had been through, all the pain and experiments and loneliness, she had chosen to trust him. He did not reach for her. He let her set the pace. She pressed against his side, seeking the warmth of another body, and slowly, she relaxed. They sat like that for hours. Over the next few days, she began to change. She followed him around the cell, always keeping a few feet of distance, but never letting him out of her sight. She mimicked his movements, the way he stretched in the morning, the way he paced to keep warm. When he sat, she sat. When he stood, she stood, and she tried to speak. The first attempt was just sounds, broken and strange, her mouth struggling with shapes it never made before. But Sam recognized what she was doing. She was trying to copy his words. He started simple. He pointed to himself and said his name clearly. Sam. She watched his lips move. Her own mouth opened and closed. A rough sound came out. Sam, he repeated, patient and encouraging. Sam. It was barely recognizable, more hiss than word, but it was there. Sam smiled so wide his face hurt. Yes, that is right, Sam. She made the chirping sound, pleased with herself. Her tail swayed back and forth, the first truly happy movement he had seen from her. On the 10th day, the Velthari made their biggest mistake. Guards entered the cell without warning. They grabbed Sam by the arms and started dragging him toward the door. He did not resist at first, too surprised to react, but she reacted. The girl launched herself at the guards with a fury that shocked everyone, including Sam. She was small, but she was fast and her claws were sharp. She tore at their protective suits, screaming in rage, fighting to protect the one creature who had ever shown her kindness. The guards threw her off. One of them pulled out a device and pressed it to her neck. She went rigid, then collapsed, unconscious before she hit the floor. No. Sam shouted, fighting now, struggling against the hands that held him. Leave her alone. They beat him for his resistance. Fists struck his face, his stomach, his back. He fell to the ground and they kicked him until he stopped moving. Through the pain, he heard them talking in their clicking language, angry and confused. Then they dragged him back into the cell and threw him down. The door sealed behind him. Sam lay on the cold floor, tasting blood in his mouth. Everything hurt, but he forced himself to move, crawling toward the small silver shape lying motionless nearby. He reached her and checked her breathing. Still alive, just unconscious from whatever they had used on her. Relief flooded through him, so strong it made him dizzy. He pulled himself into a sitting position and gently moved her head onto his lap. He would not leave her alone on the cold floor. He would be here when she woke up. The Volturi watched through the glass, still taking their notes. They recorded the violence, the protective behavior, the strange bond between species. But they still did not understand. Hours passed. The girl stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening as she remembered what had happened. She looked up and saw Sam's face above her, bruised and bloody, but smiling. "Hello," he said softly. "I am still here." She made a sound he had never heard before, something between a whimper and a chirp. Then she pressed herself against him, her small hands gripping his arm, her face buried against his chest. She did not let go for the rest of the night. Day 12 came with a cold gray light and a new understanding between them. The girl no longer kept her distance. She stayed close to Sam at all times, following him like a shadow. When he sat against the wall, she sat beside him. When he slept, she curled up near his feet, close enough to touch if she needed to. The trust had become something deeper now. Something like family. Sam looked at her one morning as she gnawed on her portion of the nutrient block. She had stopped eating like a starving animal. She took her time now, mimicking the way he ate, learning from his example. She needed a name. The Valtteri had called her Subject 7, a number, not a name. A thing, not a person. Sam refused to think of her that way. "I want to give you a name," he said, keeping his voice soft. She looked up at him, tilting her head in the way she did when she was listening. "A real name. Something that belongs to you," she chirped, encouraging him to continue. Sam thought about it carefully. Names mattered. They carried meaning and memory. He thought about his sister back on Earth, the wild girl who loved the rain, the girl who was fearless and free. "Lily," he said. "I would like to call you Lily. Is that okay?" She tried to repeat it, her mouth working around the unfamiliar sounds. "Lee," he said again, pointing at her. Lee. Close enough." Sam smiled. "Lily, that is you. That is your name." She made the happy chirping sound and pressed against his side. She understood. She had a name now. She was someone. Over the next few days, Lily began to show Sam her world. She took his hand and led him around the cell, pointing out things he had never noticed. Scratches on the wall in one corner, dozens of them, marking time in a way she could understand. She had been here for years, counting every terrible day. She showed him a crack near the floor, hidden in the shadows. Inside, she had collected small things. A piece of wire, a smooth stone, a scrap of cloth that might have once been colorful. These were her treasures, the only things she owned in the world. And in the ceiling above her corner, almost invisible unless you knew to look, was a vent cover that had come loose. Sam stared at it. "Have you been through there?" Lily shrank back, her ears flattening. She was afraid of that dark space. She had discovered it long ago, but never had the courage to explore alone. Sam's mind began to work. He was a pilot. He understood ships and stations, how they were built, how systems connected. That vent led somewhere. It had to. He started paying closer attention to the Valtteri guards. They came and went at regular times, following patterns he could memorize. He watched through the glass when they thought he was sleeping, counting their footsteps, noting which ones carried weapons. Lily watched him watching them. She was smart enough to understand what he was doing. She started helping, tapping his arm when she heard footsteps approaching, warning him when the scientists returned to observe. They were becoming a team. On day 14, Sam heard something that changed everything. Two guards stood outside the cell, speaking in their clicking language. Sam had picked up a few words over the days, enough to catch the general meaning of their conversation. They were talking about the experiment. They were talking about termination. His blood went cold. Termination. They were going to kill him. He kept his face calm, not letting them see that he understood. When they left, he moved close to Lily and knelt down to her level. "We have to leave," he said quietly. "Soon. Tomorrow, maybe. Do you understand?" She looked at him with her golden eyes. She understood danger. She understood urgency. She nodded once, a sharp little movement she had learned from him. "The vent," Sam said, pointing up. "We go through there, together. I will not leave you behind." Lily looked at the dark opening she had feared for so long. Then she looked at Sam. He had protected her. He had fed her. He had taken pain for her. If he said they had to go into the darkness, she would follow. She took his hand and squeezed it with her small clawed fingers. That night, they prepared. Sam stretched his muscles, working out the stiffness from days of confinement. Lily paced the cell, her movements sharp and alert. They did not speak much. They did not need to. Sam thought about what waited beyond the cell. He had no weapons, no map, no real plan beyond reaching the docking bay and stealing a ship. The odds were against them. A single human and a small alien child against an entire research station. But the alternative was death. And Sam had not survived this long by giving up. As the lights dimmed for the night cycle, Lily curled up against his side. This had become their routine now, sharing warmth in the cold cell. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like an ending and a beginning. "Lily," Sam said softly, "whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know something." She looked up at him, waiting. "You are not a test subject. You are not a number. You are a person. A brave, strong person who survived things that would have broken anyone else. And I am proud to know you." She did not understand all the words, but she understood the feeling. She pressed her face against his chest, making the soft chirping sound. "Sam," she said. His name, clear and certain. "Yes," he replied. "Sam and Lily, we are going to be okay." Outside the cell, the station hummed with activity. Guards patrolled the hallways. Scientists reviewed their data. Commander Vorath signed the order for termination, scheduled for the next morning. None of them knew what was coming. In the cell, Lily closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. For the first time since she could remember, she was not afraid of tomorrow. Sam was here. Sam had a plan. Sam would keep her safe. She trusted him completely, and Sam stayed awake through the night, holding her close, running through the plan in his mind. Tomorrow, they would fight. Tomorrow, they would run. Tomorrow, they would be free or they would die trying. There was no other choice. The morning lights flickered on, cold and bright. Sam was already awake, his body tense with anticipation. Beside him, Lily stirred and opened her golden eyes. She looked at him and knew immediately that the time had come. "Ready?" Sam whispered. She nodded once. They moved quickly. Sam lifted Lily up to the loose vent cover, and she pulled it aside with her claws. The opening was small, barely wide enough for Sam to squeeze through, but it would work. Lily climbed in first, her smaller body slipping easily into the darkness. Sam followed, pulling himself up with his arms and pushing with his legs until he was inside. The vent was cramped and dark, smelling of dust and recycled air. Lily could see better than him in the low light. She took his hand and led him forward, crawling through the metal tunnel on their hands and knees. Behind them, Sam heard the cell door open. He heard the surprised shouts of the guards finding an empty room. An alarm began to wail, echoing through the station. "Faster," he said, and Lily moved. The vents twisted and branched in confusing patterns. But Lily seemed to know where she was going. She had spent years in that cell, listening to the sounds of the station, feeling its vibrations through the walls. She had mapped it in her mind without even realizing. They dropped down into a maintenance corridor, empty and dim. Sam took the lead now, moving toward the sounds of machinery that he hoped meant a docking bay. They passed storage rooms and equipment blockers. Sam grabbed a heavy wrench from one of them. It was not much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. The alarm continued to scream. Red lights flashed at every intersection. The station knew they had escaped, and it was hunting them. They turned a corner and found 2 guards blocking the path. The Valkyrie soldiers raised their weapons, but Sam was faster. He swung the wrench hard, catching the first guard in the arm. The weapon clattered to the floor. Lily launched herself at the second guard, her claws finding the gaps in his armor. He went down screaming. Sam grabbed Lily's hand and they ran. More guards appeared behind them, shouting in their clicking language. Energy bolts flew past, scorching the walls. Sam pushed Lily ahead of him, shielding her with his body as they sprinted down the corridor. Finally, they burst through a set of doors and into a wide open space. The docking bay. Ships of various sizes sat in neat rows, their hulls gleaming under harsh lights. Sam's eyes found what he was looking for. A small transport shuttle, just big enough for 2. "There," he said, pointing. "Run!" They crossed the bay floor, exposed and vulnerable. Alarms blared. Guards poured in from multiple entrances. Sam's lungs burned and his legs ached, but he did not slow down. They reached the shuttle. The ramp was down, the door open. Sam pushed Lily inside and followed, slamming the control panel to close the ramp behind them. The cockpit was simple, designed for cargo runs rather than combat. Sam dropped into the pilot's seat, and his hands moved across the controls. Years of flying came back to him like muscle memory. The engines hummed to life. A figure appeared at the cockpit window. Commander Vorath, his black eyes burning with cold fury. "You cannot escape," the commander said, his voice coming through the external speakers. "You are animals, test subjects. You have no value beyond what we give you." Sam looked at Lily, huddled in the co-pilot's seat. She was shaking, but her eyes were fierce. She had never been more alive. He turned back to face Vorath. "She is not your subject anymore," Sam said. "She has a name. She has a family. And we are leaving." He pushed the throttle forward. The shuttle lurched, breaking free of its docking clamps. The bay doors ahead were still closed, but Sam did not hesitate. He fired the shuttle's small weapons, blasting the doors open. Alarms screamed. Valkyrie scattered. The shuttle shot through the opening and into the black void of space behind them. The research station grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among the stars. Sam let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. They had made it. They were free. Lily made a sound beside him, something between a laugh and a cry. She reached out and touched his arm, her golden eyes wet with tears she did not know how to shed. "Safe," Sam said, covering her hand with his. "We are safe now." He programmed a distress signal into the communication system, broadcasting on human frequencies. Then he leaned back in his seat and let the exhaustion wash over him. There was nothing more to do but wait. 3 days later, the Earth Fleet patrol vessel Dawn Chaser found them. The shuttle had drifted into human territory, its distress signal drawing the attention of the patrol. A rescue team prepared to board, unsure what they would find. Reports of escaped prisoners from a Valkyrie station had reached them, but details were scarce. Lieutenant Grace Palmer led the boarding team. She was a veteran of first contact situations, trained to expect anything. But nothing had prepared her for what she found inside that shuttle. The human pilot was asleep in the pilot's seat, his face bruised and his clothes torn. In his lap, curled up like a child seeking comfort, was a small alien girl with silver fur and a tail wrapped around his arm. She was asleep too. Truly, deeply asleep. Not the light, fearful rest of a captive animal, but the heavy, peaceful sleep of someone who felt completely safe. Grace signaled her team to stay back. She approached slowly, making no sudden movements. The human stirred first, his eyes opening to see uniforms he recognized. "Earth Fleet?" he asked, his voice rough from thirst. "Lieutenant Grace Palmer, Dawn Chaser," she said. "You are safe now. What happened to you?" Sam looked down at Lily, still sleeping against his chest. She had not woken at the sound of new voices. She trusted that if Sam was calm, there was no danger. "I was captured," Sam said. "They'd put me in a cell with her." She was feral, terrified. "They wanted us to fight." He paused, his hand resting gently on her silver fur. "I just showed her that not every hand is raised to hurt." Grace stared at the sleeping child. The intel reports had described a dangerous creature, a failed experiment, something to be contained. But all she saw was a little girl who had finally found peace. "What is her name?" Grace asked. Sam smiled, tired but genuine. "Lily. Her name is Lily." The rescue team brought them aboard the Dawn Chaser. Medical staff treated Sam's injuries and ran careful scans on Lily, who woke up confused and scared until she saw Sam nearby. Then she calmed, staying close to him as strangers moved around them. Word spread through the ship and beyond. A human had bonded with a feral alien child. He had protected her, taught her to trust, given her a name. The story reached Earth, and the authorities began processing paperwork for something unprecedented. 6 months later, Sam stood in a courtroom and officially adopted Lily under Earth's interspecies refugee laws. She stood beside him, wearing clothes for the first time, her silver fur brushed clean, her golden eyes bright with understanding. She had learned to speak in those months. Simple sentences at first, then longer ones. She called him Sam in public. In private, when they were alone, she had started calling him something else. A word she had learned from watching human families. She called him Dad. They moved to a small house on the edge of a coastal town. It had a garden, something Sam had insisted on. He wanted Lily to see the things he had described in that cold gray cell. Grass, flowers, open sky. One evening, clouds gathered overhead. Lily stood at the window, watching with curious eyes. Then the first drops began to fall. Rain. Sam opened the door and stepped outside, letting the water wash over his face. Lily followed hesitantly, unsure of this strange phenomenon. The drops hit her fur, cool and gentle. She looked up at the sky, at the clouds that gave this gift of water. She looked at Sam, smiling beside her, and she remembered his stories from the cell. His sister who loved the rain. Lily laughed. It was the first time she had truly laughed. A bright sound that filled the garden in Sam's heart. She ran through the rain, spinning and jumping, feeling the drops on her fur. Alive and free in a way she had never dreamed possible. Sam watched her, tears mixing with the rain on his face. This was why humans were different. Not because of strength or technology or conquest. Because a human could sit with a frightened child in a cold cell and simply offer kindness. Because a human could see a monster and choose to see a person instead. Love was the greatest power in the universe. And it had set them both free.